Hey guys, we are back updating the power rankings for Survivor 45 following episode 5 and the end of the pre-merge surprisingly. It felt a little quick, though it is in line with Survivor 43, which had a similar timeline in terms of the boots, but obviously, this is obviously going to be a pretty big turning point in the game, and there's quite a bit to get into here. But there are 14 players to talk about, and let's not waste any more time, let's get right into the video. So starting off at number 14, we have the boot from this past week, and here we have Brando, and this wasn't too surprising. I mean, Brando's been pretty under-edited in general. He got pretty much no content in the swap episode, didn't really see anything from his side of things on the swap tribe, and obviously with him getting a visibility spike here, it just made sense for him to be taken out here over Kendra, and for his side to be on the losing side of the vote. Now we did see him try to bring over Drew, only for Drew to turn down his alliance. We saw him also try to offer his shot in the dark to Drew, really trying to build trust there. However, again, I feel like that was just more set up for him being taken out here. And again, I never really felt like Brando had a shot given his edit. And from a game standpoint, I felt like he played pretty well on his initial tribe. He seemed to be in a pretty good position there due to his relationship with Kelly. However, I feel like his post swap is not great, where even though it was obviously not the best swap in the world for him, I feel like there could have been a world where he could have vied more for Emily's vote. However, it seems like he just relied way too much on Kendra in order to build that relationship, given that Kendra and Emily already knew each other, and he didn't really do much to help himself there. And I also feel like him offering a shot in the dark just made him come off as kind of sketchy, if you ask me, to where it made more sense for Drew to target him over Kendra. So at the end of the day, I feel like Brando's probably not the best player in the world. And while he had an okay start to the game, I feel like he didn't really play that well in the post swap. And obviously, he's out of the game now, which is why he's here at number 14. And before we continue, I just wanted to give a quick shout out to Russell Muscle TV, who I'm partnering up with this season to promote Idle Plays. Idle Plays is an online shop where you can purchase Survivor puzzles so you can practice them and be just like Carson from Survivor 44. We got all different selections here, including the fire puzzle, the snake to the top puzzle, the 5-piece puzzle that Spencer solved in 5 seconds from Survivor Cambodia, and more. If you want to take home Survivor puzzles made by superfans for superfans, feel free to click the link in the description and start shopping now. And with that, there are 13 players left in the game to talk about, and as usual, I'll be ranking them based on how likely they are to win, based off their edit and current game position. But at number 13, the person I believe is the least likely to win from this point on is J Maya. Now, I did have Jay a couple spots higher last week. I felt like last episode was a bit better for her, but this episode just kind of brought her back down to earth. Again, she got content here, but I feel like it was mostly bad content. Like, we saw her trying to maneuver around this by going up to the women and telling them that she's going to basically take the blame for putting the vote on the Sefue at the last tribal, which is pretty bad on its own, considering that, again, it's completely unnecessary. She's just allowing herself to put votes on herself, especially in a case where she thinks that Sefue was an idol. Like, it just feels like she's just putting a lot of risk on herself here. And I feel like the episode doesn't really portray that positively either, where, again, rather than us seeing her enact the strategy, we cut to Dee and Julie talking about how this is an opportunity to take out J Maya down the road, which is pretty bad there. She obviously goes on the journey later and has some interesting moments here, like when she's first picked, she announces to everyone in the game that she picked Austin to go on the summit because he's going to provide them information, which is pretty bad, that she's being very open about this. It's obviously way too transparent there. And we immediately cut to Austin telling his tribe that he's not going to share information. So that's pretty bad there. And then we get to the actual journey where she's the main proponent of them taking the amulets, which again should be portrayed as positive considering that she is choosing game over food. However, even then, it is shown in a negative light where we cut to Austin saying that he wanted the food. We get his perspective on how he got denied the food and that he's going to take revenge on J Maya and Kelly by taking them out of the game so that he can get the ale for himself. I feel like on the whole, the episode was just kind of dunking on J Maya a lot. And while she was shown playing the game, I feel like it was showing her play the game poorly. And I feel like with that, I just can't justify putting her any higher than number 13 here. Now moving into number 12, and I did initially have this person one spot higher. However, after reading Brando's exit interview, I just could not justify it. And here we have Bruce. And the main thing about Bruce is he got a mostly negative episode here. I mean, we saw like him going back to his bossy self, like we show him being bossy around camp. We also get more Coutura like dunking on him. And with the merge right around the corner, I feel like this rivalry is about to culminate here. I feel like we're finally going to see this battle playing out. And while I feel like Coutura has been getting a bit of a one note edit here, I still feel like Bruce is ultimately going to be on the losing side of this. Especially now hearing from Brando in his exit interview, where he reveals that had Bello gone to tribal early on, Bruce would have been the first boot off that tribe. It seems like at this point, everyone on that tribe recognizes how bossy he is and that he is someone that they would want to target there. So I feel like through that doesn't give me much faith in Bruce, especially with this merge. I feel like he has a lot of potential to be the next boot off the season, which is pretty bad there. And it's kind of a shame considering how high people were on Bruce coming into the season, where even Brando himself talked about wanting to work with Bruce, among other people. And yet for Bruce to be in this spot at this point, and with the merge right around the corner, I feel like this is going to be such a danger point for Bruce. And it wouldn't shock me if come next week I'm talking about how he's the boot here. So I feel like it's for all those reasons that I couldn't have Bruce any higher than number 12. Now moving on to number 11, and we have the person that I initially had below Bruce, however I had them one spot higher, and here we have Sefue, and I feel like this was just more of the same for him, where obviously we got plenty of content from him, like trying to investigate who voted for him last tribal, and him not quite figuring it out. We learned that he has made this fake idol, and obviously I feel like a lot of this is just kind of goofy when you think about it. So I feel like nothing really changed for me with regards to Sefue. I feel like he's still like probably not going to win. And I could see a world where he is the merge boot as well. I feel like it wouldn't be impossible if he were targeted here, considering how little connection he has with the rest of the cast. However, I feel like Bruce is a bit more likely to have a downfall next week compared to Sefue, which is why I gave him the edge. But he is still not going to win. He is here at number 11. Now moving on to number 10, and we have someone who I have had consistently had around this spot, but here we have Julie. And again, I feel like Julie is someone who has been getting a consistent presence. She's gotten a confessional now in at least every episode. And obviously here we see her talking about weighing the options about targeting J Maya or taking out Sefue here. However, I feel like it doesn't really lead to much here. And I feel like I'm kind of left the same about Julie, where I feel kind of underwhelmed by her actual content, where even though she's getting a consistent presence, I feel like it's not really leading to a win. And because of that, I do have her here at number 10. Now moving on to number 9, and we have someone who I've actually dropped quite a bit from last week. And I feel like I'm kind of out on this person at this point, but here we have Kendra. Now, Kendra has actually had a bit of a spike here in content here, where in this episode we see her like eating a worm, or at least trying to, and we do hear people talking about how she's full of energy, and like you figure that would lead to something, except it leads with her being on the outs here, where she is blindsided when Emily sides with the Rebos to take out Brando here, which isn't particularly great. However, I feel like at this point, like Kendra's overall content and storyline has been kind of underwhelming here, to where even though, again, she is someone who has had a strong premiere and has had like bits and pieces here and there, I feel like at this point there have been so many missed opportunities with her. Like in the last episode, the fact that we didn't see her perspective really at all. And I feel like the fact that we don't get much from her relationship with Emily is such a major missed opportunity here, where now we learn from Brando's exit interview that supposedly Kendra and Emily built this really strong bond during the twist in episode 1, where Kendra got to spend the afternoon at Lulu's camp. And again, the fact that they don't even mention that on the show, they don't even like bring it up, was a bit of a worry for me, but at the time I didn't really factor in as much. I feel like now, considering that we have seen her on the SWAT tribe with someone that she could have connected with, only for that to not really amount to really anything, not even a sense of betrayal from Kendra over Emily flipping over, is such a knock to me that I can't really defend her much anymore. Now, yes, there is maybe a chance that her edit could pick up more next episode, but I feel like at this point, I just can't defend Kendra as much as I can with other people, which is a big reason why I've dropped her here to number 9. Now we're moving on to number 8, and I know that this has been a controversial take of mine, however, I still have it, and here we have Caleb. And I actually got quite a few comments in my video last week about how Caleb is definitely a top contender, how his lack of personal content isn't a knock because Gabler happened, and how in general, like Caleb is definitely winning this season. However, I still remain the same on Caleb. I feel like he is someone that's just there to be a big player. And while we've gotten plenty of strategic content from him, including in this episode, where we have seen him talking about wanting to work with Kelly and that he wants to like move forward, how he wants to remain loyal to Bruce for the time being, but is willing to cut him and just make him feel complacent for right now. Again, all of it's like pretty competent strategic content here, but I feel like that's all it is. Like, he doesn't have too much of a storyline here. I feel like the only storyline he has is the one with Emily, but even then, I still feel like Emily is eventually just going to outgrow Caleb and in turn be the one to take him out. I feel like at this point, my view of Caleb has remained largely the same, even with people feeling like he should be higher on my power ranking. But I feel like at this point, I feel like he's just someone that's just going to be there as a big player, kind of like a Shan or an Omer from 42, and then eventually just be cut in this big move. So I feel like I don't really have much positive to say about Caleb, even though this episode didn't present him in a negative light. I feel like my overall view of Caleb is the same, and he is here at number 8. Now moving on to number 7, and we have another player who I remain largely unchanged on, and here we have Austin. And I feel like Austin got the upper hand here in terms of his content with J Maya, but even like obviously at the tribal, where he obviously is a big force in taking out Brando, through him obviously sacrificing his vote due to the idol rules, but then ultimately saving his vote with the goodwill advantage, which again allows him to get the upper hand here. However, it is kind of a raw deal considering that he would have to immediately sacrifice his vote again if he wants to extend the idol to the end of the game, which is a bit unfortunate. But again, we also see him in this episode go on the journey here. He tells his tribe he's not going to share information after J Maya announces it to everyone. That's why he was picked. And obviously, he is shown being the narrator of this whole scene where he wants to not get the advantage due to the target it would put on his back. And then after like he's kind of forced into taking the amulet, we see his perspective about how he's going to get revenge on J Maya and Kelly for taking him away from the food. And again, while this is kind of comical in a lot of ways, I feel like it shows that he's probably going to get the last laugh here. And again, I feel like Austin is being propped to a degree. However, at the same time, I feel like my view of him hasn't changed too much. Again, I feel like he's kind of similar to Caleb in the sense that he's being shown as like this big player, someone that's been getting a lot of consistent content, but hasn't really taken the next level yet. So I feel like for now, I can't really have Austin too much higher here, although I do recognize this was a solid episode for him, and he is here at number 7. Now moving on to number 6, and this person has gone down one spot from last week, and I'm still very conflicted about where this person really is in the game, but here we have Coutura. And I've also gotten comments about this, about how people feel like Coutura is going to lose the battle against Bruce here, about how her content is all one-dimensional, how it's solely about Bruce, and how a lot of it feels kind of unreasonable. And I do share that sentiment that at this point, like, it's gotten a bit cartoonish with how much her focus is on Bruce. However, I still feel like the show is kind of showing her in the right here, where obviously in this episode we did see Bruce being bossy, and we have seen like people like Akela talking about wanting to cut Bruce at some point and how they're just placating him for now. I feel like in some ways Coutura is being vindicated here, though at the same time, like, we got some negativity from her as well, where she got caught looking for idols. And apparently, based on Brando's interview, this is something that she has done consistently throughout the season, where she would just disappear from camp from long periods of time. So I feel like from a pure game standpoint, I feel like Katura's not in the best spot, obviously, and she kind of has some knocks against her. Though I'm still not completely out on her simply because of her premiere. I feel like if it wasn't for her premiere, I probably would be out on her at this point. But it's the fact that she at least got set up to her like storyline down the road that makes me feel like she could have a bit of a rebound here. Then also, I feel like I still think she is going to win this battle against Bruce. That makes her a bit higher on the list, though at the same time, like, my reservations about her do knock her down to number 6. Now moving on to number 5, and this person has been creeping their way up the power rankings over the course of the season, and here we have Jake. And I feel like Jake's kind of the opposite of Coutura, where Coutura had a solid premiere, but everything thereafter was kind of mixed. I feel like Jake is someone that had a shaky premiere, obviously, but I feel like since then has gotten like sprinkles of more positive content. And this episode was probably the biggest example of this, where we see him blacking out again. And this leading right into his intro package where he gets his own sob story talking about how he used to be overweight, but then he turned his life around. He started losing weight, and that he came out here as a celebration of all his hard work, and how it's frustrating that he is struggling with passing out, and that if he's going out of this game, he's going out fighting, and that he's fighting his way through the game. And again, all this was pretty positive. Again, it was a pretty positive spin here. I'm not entirely sure what to make of it in terms of his overall trajectory, considering that this could just be like another journey edit. This could be just him, like, again, like being like a likable figure, but not someone that's going to get to the very end. However, we do also see him, like, again, working his way in strategically with people like a Caleb, for instance. Again, I think there's definitely a bit of a path forward for Jake here. And even with his shaky premiere, I feel like the fact that he was upfront about him being a lawyer from the beginning could somewhat tie into the season's themes about authenticity. And I feel like that could be another pro for Jake. So there's definitely a path forward for Jake. However, it's the mixture of his premiere plus me being not entirely sure how journey edit this feels that leaves him here at number 5. Now moving on to number 4, and this person has gone down from last week, but here we have Drew. And obviously this is Drew's first tribal, and he almost gets blindsided here in a 3-2 vote, which is pretty hairy. And plus, I think from a pure gameplay standpoint, it's kind of his own fault where we see him openly turning down Brando's alliance offer, which is really insane when you think about it. Like, even if he had no intention of working with Brando, like, he should have just said yes to the alliance and then gone from there. But I feel like it's him turning down that alliance that kind of led to Brando targeting Drew in this round, which obviously isn't particularly great. And obviously we see Brando later offering Drew his shot in the dark, which I know people give him some flack for not accepting it. However, I don't think it's that bad. I feel like he probably would have been better off like trying to placate Brando there. But obviously, like, we do see him and Austin maneuvering around. And I do kind of give Austin a bit more credit for ensuring that Emily didn't flip there. I feel like Austin has kind of shown himself as someone to pick up a lot of Drew's shortcomings here, as I feel like this episode kind of highlighted to me that Drew's probably not going to be as good of a player compared to Carson, even though he is being propped up as such. But it's still the fact that he's being set up as a big character across the season. He's still getting the Carson style of edit that makes me feel like he's going to be a major character across the season, but obviously someone that's going to come up short by the end. I don't think too much has really changed here. However, we now have a better sense of how Drew actually is as a player, which is not very good. But for now, I do have him here at number 4. Now moving on to number 3, and I did debate whether this person was too high. However, I feel like this episode was okay enough for them, and here we have Kelly. And realistically, I still think there's a big chance for Kelly to misplay her hand here. I think there's definitely a chance for her to be like an early merge boot, sort of similar to like what we saw from like Matthew from 44, for instance. However, I still think this was an okay enough episode for her. Like, she is shown like being sympathetic towards Jake after he blacks out, talking about how Coutura is a hot mess when she is continuing to target Bruce. And obviously she gets sent onto the journey where it did seem like this is going to continue her storyline of her being in the middle and that she is, you know, like obviously going to have to make a tough decision there. However, that kind of leads to nothing as J. Maya just kind of stumbles in and basically forces their hand, taking the amulets there. So not entirely sure what to make of that. I am still very conflicted over whether Kelly is actually a true winner contender. As a bit of a spoiler alert, I feel like the top 2 are very definitively the top 2. However, I feel like Kelly kind of has less flaws than the people we already talked about, which is why I have her here at number 3. Now moving on to number 2, and it's the same top 2 as last week. However, I did decide to switch the order for this week, and here we have Emily. And the main reason I have Emily at number 2 is I feel like this episode was not as strong for her compared to the other person, where obviously she does end up going to tribal here. We do get the culmination of her being the swing vote on this tribe. However, we get plenty of content of her like wanting to work with the Bellows and Kendra and Brando here, which kind of feels pretty jarring considering we didn't get any focus of that last episode. And plus a lot of it felt like a misdirect anyway, to where she does ultimately side with the Rebas, obviously. Like, I still feel like she's going to be a very strong contender moving forward. However, with that said, she does also talk about how she feels terrible since she gave both sides her word and that she could see a path forward with both of them. Like, we do get that sort of back and forth that does lead to her siding with the Rebas here. I still feel like Emily is a top contender, obviously, and I feel like this next round will be pretty indicative of that. However, I feel like the number one person had a more solid episode this week, which is why I do have them here at number 2. And now, at number 1, the person I believe is the most likely to win Survivor 45 right now is D. And considering the circumstances, I feel like D had a very solid episode here, where obviously early on she gets to explain her vote for Sefue last Tribal, talking about how Tribal couldn't have gone any worse, and that Sefue is mad that he got a vote. And we don't really see her like getting too much heat for it from Sifu's end. We even see later on that J. Maya is willing to throw herself under the bus here by taking credit for that, which leads into her and Julie considering the possibility of taking out J. Maya down the road, which would be pretty interesting there. However, the biggest reason that I put her at number 1 is her intro package. Like, she does get an intro package here alongside Jake, and a lot of it feels like pretty purposeful, where like she does compare herself to Sean and the fact that she never quits, and that she talks about her family and her immigrant background, and that quitting is not an option for her. And again, a lot of that felt very unnecessary, even less necessary than Jake's intro package, which came off the heels of him like blacking out. I feel like D's like could have been cut out, but like I feel like it was just a way for her to prop herself up. And I feel like D, again, has further cemented herself as a solid winner contender here. Really, I see it as a battle between D and Emily right now. However, with D having a stronger overall episode compared to Emily, I did decide to give her the edge for this week, which is why she is here at number 1. And there we go. That'll do it for this week's video. If you like this content, be sure to like and subscribe. Really helps out with the channel. And I'll be back again next week to update the power rankings again, so you can stay tuned for that. I'm still covering Big Brother 25, Amazing Race 35, and I have just begun coverage of Survivor UK, so you can expect weekly power rankings of those shows. I am now on Patreon, so if you want to consider supporting the channel, you can do so by clicking the link in the description. And if you haven't already, you can also join the Discord server by also clicking the link in the description. There's a lot of stuff coming your way, but for now, that is the video. See ya.